Good morning, everybody. How is everybody doing today? It is Linda, and I think over here is
Carl.
And it's Friday, February 24th, and today is
Yay!
Hello! Yay! Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for checking in. I see we've got Nedra checking in from Arizona, and it's sunny there. And there's Julie in Southern Pines. Let us know what the weather's like. You know, apparently we had snow here last night at the base of the Palm Springs Tramway, which is something that hasn't happened for quite a while. And I think our friends in Ventura might have had a little dusting of snow too. So apparently we're under blizzard warnings in the San Gabriel Mountains and Inland Empire and all sorts of things. And, you know, we were watching the weathermen last night and they were having great fun reporting all of this wild weather here in Southern California. And for us in Palm Springs, it really hasn't been that wild. We've just had some rain. So things might look a little different here today at the Colourwerx Dezign Haus. This is episode 55 of the Fab Friday program. Welcome in. Hello, Suzanne. I see you checking in from Vista. We are testing out some new lighting. So if I look like I'm looking all over the place, I am. So we've got some new lighting here in the sewing studio. We're working on a new computer. We have a new version of our eCam streaming software that we're using. So everything is kind of new.
And a new camera.
And a new camera. The lighting we're using, I'm not an influencer, but I thought I would show it in case anybody wants to know what we're using, which is called Edge Light from Loom Cube. And we've got two set up on our side. And the reason we're redoing all this stuff is because I'm in a slightly smaller space when we moved households. And so we found over the past, weeks, we've been teaching, we've been Zooming, doing Zoom workshops, and the sewing studio was feeling really claustrophobic. Because we had lots of lights on stands in front of me. We had fill lights on the back, you know, to separate people from the background here, and all this other stuff. So it was quite claustrophobic, and trying to get from the desk to the sewing machine to demo during workshops or lectures was really like going through a minefield. So what we've done is we've reduced the footprint. This is getting too technical. I guess I should show you a picture someday. But we reduced the footprint on the floor, and these are clip-on lights. So these LumiCube things are clip-on lights, these edge lights. They clip onto the desk in front of me, and you can adjust the warmth and the coolness of the lighting and so forth and so forth. Yeah, it's very technical. So let us know what it looks like out there, because we spent a good portion of yesterday in the afternoon while it was raining with dark skies trying to adjust this lighting to get, and of course, you know, you have to deal with glasses. So now I'm getting really technical, and you get lights in your glasses and all this other stuff. So let us know what it looks like. Let us know if we're streaming okay. We should be streaming which is kind of exciting, to both Colourwerx Facebook page and the Colourwerx Quilt Along page. Ooh, that's quite high technology going on. So we should be streaming both to both areas. Next month in March, we'll try streaming to all three platforms, which would be Colourwerx Facebook, Colourwerx Quilt Along Facebook, and our YouTube channel. Oh, that would be, that's very high tech, isn't it? Who's checking in from where? Yes, it's Friday. It's a fabulous day here. Rainy and windy in California. Oh, yes, in the Central Coast. Who was that? Was that Pauline? Hi, Pauline. Yes, it is. Are you having snow? I hope not. I don't know. Well, maybe you want snow. And Mary says, happy Friday. We had snow in Santa Margarita. Yes, Southern California is experiencing very strange weather. Now, those of you who are checking in and it says Facebook user, I think Carl has to do something, or you have to give us permission to show your name. So if you see your comment come up as Facebook user on the screen here, that's because you need to grant us permission. I think you can do it right on your comment there to show your name. Hi, Karen from North Carolina. Hello. Nedra says it looks good. That's good. We're trying to test out all this new equipment. Anyway, so we have been super busy, like I said, the last couple weeks. We haven't been on the air since December, if you can believe it. And that's because January was a very busy month for us, going down to the road to California in Ontario. I taught a class. It was a great show. For those of you who didn't make it down to Road this year, it was a great show, and it was jam-packed with people, and it was all really great. So Road to California is definitely back. We'll be back there next year as well, vending and also teaching. And then we have been busy, not much sewing going on. We've been Zooming to lots of people, doing workshops and lectures. In fact, we're Zooming this weekend to Canada to teach some workshops, and also doing lectures across the United States, Zooming again. But we've also been really busy trying, and I should say Carl has, getting the kitchen done. And we finally are at a point now where the kitchen is workable. It's working. It's done. We have a little video to show you. So we'll show you the video and then we'll come back to you.
Okay guys, so here's a little reveal of the new kitchen that Carl just got done. Of course, we have our tiki corner here with every vacuum cleaner known to man waiting to be used. The new bespoke refrigerator that needs its glass panels on. And as we come around the corner, you can just see as I scan these great IKEA cabinets that Carl put in, high gloss finish on the bottom and a nice glass on the top. And if I come around this way here, we are going to put an exhaust fan in there. So we're just waiting on our tile guy to put in this fabulous glass mosaic tile that has the shots of orange and turquoise in it. And of course we have an orange toaster to match. And then Carl just finished plumbing up the beautiful sink, which I'm loving, which is this deep 9-inch basin here, single sink. Just love it. It's a Krause sink in case anybody wants. And there's just a little pan of that beautiful countertop we've got going in all our cabinetry that actually works.
Yeah, so it is really exciting that the kitchen is actually working now. I'm not doing dishes anymore in the bathroom, which is a good thing. And the Krause sink, it's Kraus, in case you wanted to know. It was a combination sink that we got at Home Depot with the grate at the bottom and the faucet, and everything came together. So it's a beautiful, beautiful stainless steel, like kind of, they don't call it a farmhouse sink, but what is it? One basin sink. Super easy to put in. And so what we have left in the kitchen now.
We can bake too, you know.
We can bake now, yes,
Wow,
because we have an oven. And of course the refrigerator has glass panels waiting in the hallway that will match the tile. So that's very exciting. That's going to be the very last thing that goes on. With the bespoke Samsung appliances, in case you haven't heard, you can change out the front panels. So the dishwasher, stove are white glass, and those are going to stay white glass to match the cabinetry. And then the refrigerator, which is stainless steel right now, will ultimately become an orange, turquoise, and white glass paneled refrigerator. And then what we have left to do with the kitchen once the tile guy comes is actually the flooring. So we have to go back in and do the base molding and the flooring, and then we'll be out of that area and into the family room doing flooring, and then we'll almost be done and ready to start living and redoing the whole, restarting the whole process in the bathrooms, basically. So, you know, it's a never-ending story here. Anyway, thank you all for checking in today. We're going to start our tutorial. I wanted to start a little bit talking about decorative stitching on applique shapes. You know, when I teach the applique stitch lab, this is the most question I get is, how do you do decorative stitches? It looks so difficult. Is it super difficult? How do you start using your decorative stitches on applique shapes, etc., etc., etc. So I wanted to just go through some of the decorative stitch stuff today. It's really not difficult at all. In fact, it's probably simpler than doing a zigzag stitch or a buttonhole stitch around applique shapes, because each decorative stitch has its own unique kind of rhythm to it, and the way it takes the decorative stitch, whether it jumps center, goes right to center, left to center, and I'll show you all that. And so let's go to the overhead, and I'm just going to show you. Thank you, Tina, for all your comments down there. I see that. Yes, it is going to be gorgeous. Carl's done a great job with the kitchen, so it'll be fabulous.
Well, you built some of it.
I built some of it, but Carl did the pretty much the bigger part of it. So anyway, back to decorative stitching. That's what the subject of today is, other than the kitchen. And hopefully once we get done, I can get back to doing some quilting in the studio here. So this is the Mini Splendor wall hanging. And anybody who's taken my Applique Stitch Lab class, you know this. This is the project we use in class. It's a pattern available in our Colourwerx shop if you want to try it. It's a wonderful way to start fine-tuning your applique stitching if that's what you want to do. If you need some, if you want to just start working on stitches or need a little vehicle, a little pattern to help you break out decorative stitches, this is a great way of doing it. These are all some of my favorite. This is one I made with Tula Pink True Colors. And these are all my favorite decorative stitches. Now, I have a Bernina 750 QE. So a lot of the stitch numbers I might call out today, if you have a Bernina and it's one of the higher end models, they might be the same. But really, most of the machine manufacturers have all of these decorative stitches I'm showing you in them somewhere. On the higher end models, you just have to go find them and then make notes for yourself. This is one of my favorite ones right here. This one I discovered the other day. I'll give you the number in just a minute, but isn't that a great looking stitch? You can see it right there around each of the shapes. So it's really fun. So that's one mini Splendor thing. And then I thought I'd show you this other version. Oh, by the way, in case you didn't know this, you can machine quilt your background first and then put your applique shapes on and applique stitch around them, and then your quilt is actually quilted at the same time that you're doing all the applique stitching because you've machine quilted your background first. So if you look here, if I can get it in the shadows of the light, you can see this little pop art kind of flower, groovy flower pattern. That was done on my long arm, and I just simply took a piece of background fabric and put it on the long arm one day, did it all over edge to edge on it, and then used this as the background for my mini Splendor quilt. And I did the same with this one here that I'm going to show you in a minute. It doesn't, you don't have to put it on a long arm. You don't have to have a long arm to do this. You can just do straight line quilting. But remember, that's the key, the tip. You can machine quilt your background fabric first. Just layer your 3 layers together with the batting, the backing fabric, and the whatever your background fabric is for your appliques. Machine quilt it, and then put all your applique shapes on top. So this is another version of the mini Splendor pattern, and this one was done with cherrywood fabrics, and I love their fabrics because they give that kind of suede, hand-dyed look to everything. But this particular one I wanted to show you because if you look closely there, you can see that I have used like a straight stitch down the middle of each petal, and then it ends in that little, what do you call that?
French knot.
Well, it's like a French knot, like a stamen. I don't know what you call it. But it gives more texture to the actual applique shape. And so that was simply something that I just programmed in my Bernina to go straight, 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 and then end with one full complete kind of satin stitch dot. And believe it or not, the satin stitch dot that you see at the end here is actually a diamond shape stitch in my Bernina. I'll show it to you. And I just fooled around with the stitch width and length so that it squished the whole thing inward and tinier, and it ended up looking like a little stitched French knot there at the end of all the stamens. So that is something too to keep in mind, that once you start playing around with your decorative stitches, you can figure out how to program. You don't even have to program. You can just, go from stitch to stitch, and you can play with the stitch width and length. Let's talk a little bit about kind of tools you need for this. So again, everybody knows I like Heat and Bond. Let me get that up to the Heat and Bond Light for my fusible web. So I do all raw edge machine applique. I don't do needle turn applique. I don't set it up on freezer paper or anything like that. I just use this basic fusible web applique. I'm not an influencer. This is reliable. There's Pell and Wonder under, that's good. There's Steam a Seam 2 Light. You can use that. That's more expensive. But Heat and Bond Light, for me at least, is really reliable. The release paper doesn't release too soon, and it's always sticking or fusing. I do always, when I do any kind of decorative stitching or machine applique stitching, let me see if I can get that up there to the camera, I use the Schmetz, what are these? The Schmetz quilting needles 9014 size. And why do I use 9014? Because it will accept most any weight thread. So if I'm switching between 50 weight, 40 weight, 28 weight, which is really, really thick thread, this needle, the 9014 size, whatever brand you want to choose for your machine, will accept that thread. And if you get your thread breaking right at the needle, like when you put a thread in and it goes through the eye of the needle and it starts to break or fray right at the eye of the needle, that's a sure sign. It's not tension. That's a sign that your needle size is too small for the diameter of the thread you're using. Now, if you're going to use monofilament clear thread, then yes, you can, and you can come in a little closer if you want to, Carl. I'm giving Carl we're still playing around with our new streaming software. There we go. If you're using a clear monofilament thread, and I like the Superior Threads monopoly, then you might want to use a 60 weight needle, which is very slim, has a tinier hole, therefore it makes a tinier puncture or hole in your applique shapes. Let's look at thread for a minute. I have these stitch outs. If you've taken my class, you've probably seen these, but it's always nice showing these. So this is the same petal shape with the same stitch width and length, which is my buttonhole or blanket stitch on my Bernina. And you can see I've marked down below the weight of the thread. Now remember, with thread weight, the larger the number, the finer or smaller diameter the thread is. So 50 weight is what we use for like precision piecing or when you're piecing quilt blocks together. 40 weight is like a top stitch thread for handbags. And then this 12 weight thread on the right hand side is really super thick and mimics almost like pearl cotton. And so these are exactly the same stitch width and length. The only difference is the thread weight there. And of course, Aurifil, which I'm not an influencer, but most thread brands make it easy to figure out what weight is what. So Aurifil, just because I use a lot of it, the orange colored cone is your 50 weight. The green colored cone right there is your 40 weight. And then this red colored cone is usually your 28 weight or 12 weight, something like that. I can't remember that number, but it's super thick. And all of these threads, regardless of the weight, I use the 9014 needle, okay? Now this one up here, I'll bring it up close to the camera, just shows you, because I think it's always good, let me get it there. It's always good to see what happens when you use variegated thread. So this is a zigzag stitch. Now if you were using a decorative stitch, this might look a little different. But if you're using a buttonhole stitch or a zigzag stitch, which are the pretty much the go-to stitches when you're doing machine applique, you can see with the variegated thread right here that it creates bands of color. And, everybody goes, well, I like that or I don't like that. That's a personal preference, just so you know. I don't happen to like that look because I find that the bands of color distract from the actual applique piece, the shape. But some people like that. The other thing to take note is Aurifil and some of the other thread manufacturers change colors every 2 inches. Superior Threads is one of the only thread manufacturers that change colors on the variegated threads every 1 inch. So that's just something to take note if you're really into variegated threads and you're doing a lot of machine quilting in the background and you want that thread color to change more rapidly, if you will, then maybe go for a Superior Threads King Tut, which will change thread colors. The color in the variegated thread will change every 1 inch versus every 2 inches. This is the same petal shape with the monopoly. So this is monopoly Superior Threads clear thread, and you can see some little punctures there on the edge. This is just a little, I think it's a little, I had to look on the back. It's just a little zigzag stitch going on. So you can see it kind of mimics needle turn, not exactly, but it barely shows up. And by the time you wash this thing, it might even look more needle turn than actually. So don't discount the clear thread for your applique shapes either, because sometimes you want to mimic that look of needle turn and you really don't want to do it by hand. So with all that said, then let's talk about decorative stitches for a minute. And everybody goes, well, how do you start this? What do you do? Well, you know what? I would just start with a stitch out. So this is just some favorite stitches on my Bernina. You can kind of see them up there when I get it shining out of the light. But this was just one day. It was a scrap piece of fabric. And this was like one of the first days that I kind of decided that I was going to start putting decorative stitches on the edges of appliques. And Tina's asking, what weight is the clear thread? It's very fine. It's like it's like fishing line. So you would use a 60 weight needle with that clear thread. It's like fishing line. It's very, very fine thread, Tina. And are there different thread weights? Yes. And that's what the colors of the Aurifil, when you get this. That's what all those different colored cones mean. So you know, it's hard to see here, but you've got green, red in the middle, and orange. And so a lot of the manufacturers of threads will give you different colors on the cones to denote what thread weight that is. And again, thread weight works like this. The lower the number of the thread weight, like 25 weight or 28 weight, that's a thicker thread than a 50 weight. So the higher the thread weight number, the finer or thinner the thread. It's not that it's not strong, it's just a thinner diameter. So that's it. So these were just some decorative stitches here that I just tried out on my Bernina one day. And I think this is a good place to start. I always tell people in class that the best way to figure out decorative stitches is to sit down at your machine and actually do a stitch out. Now this is a more extensive stitch out that I did for the quilt show. So if you've seen our segment on the quilt show with Alex Anderson and Ricky that aired last year, this is something that I did for them to show them what, you know, what I was doing with my decorative stitches. And so basically what this is showing is these are all of some of my favorite decorative stitches. It's the same flower petal shape down here. Now, if you were going to do this, you don't have to use a flower petal shape. You could just use a circle. You could use a square. You could use any shape you want that you wanted to try out a decorative stitch on. And of course, each shape is going to look different or react differently with a different decorative stitch. But if I bring this up to the camera, you can see right there, like number 2 is my zigzag stitch on my Bernina 750. All those numbers underneath the stitch number, underneath the number 2, are different stitch lengths and widths. So I was fooling around with how thick I wanted the zigzag stitch to be, how, you know, maybe not less, maybe this is super wide, this is not so wide, how far apart the zigzag is, etc., etc. This is a 50 weight thread Aurifil that I'm using here. And I just created myself a quilt sandwich one day out of scrap fabric. That's all this is. Number 1329, the second stitch, is my buttonhole or blanket stitch on the Bernina. Now yours might be different, but you can see I tried different stitch widths and lengths. And then number 603 becomes one of my favorite decorative stitches on the Bernina. 1333 is more like chicken feet, if I bring that up. And then 471 is like feathers. 465 is actually the stitch that I used to create the stamen. I'll go back to that for a minute. On the Splendor. So 465 on my Bernina created those little dots at the end of the straight stitching right there. And again, I just did that by squishing that kind of diamond shape. You can kind of see it at the very top. Squishing the diamond shape down to the lowest stitch width and lowest stitch length, and it ended up being like a little circle when it got done. So you can create a whole magnitude, a whole variety of different stitches within your decorative stitches, and that's why the stitch out here is really important. And then these are just some other favorite ones on my Bernina. 1343, 1351 is really nice. It's kind of a flowery shape. And again, all of these kind of accentuate, texturize, embellish the edges of your applique shapes, and they all do it quite differently, you know, all the time. 419 on the Bernina 750, and this is probably the same on some of the newer Berninas. This is a great one for the middle of like flowers and things like that, because it kind of looks like the flower center is bursting forth, you know. And so with that, let me go over to the machine, because I want to show you how you just get started on this. And it's really not too complicated at all. Am I over at the machine now? Here. Okay, so here I am, and I'm over at my Bernina, and you know, you can see what I have here is it's just a scrap piece of fabric folded over about 3 or 4 times. And what I'm doing is I'm just sticking, I'm zigzagging. So this is my zigzag stitch. I've got a 40 weight thread in. That's the green cone of Aurifil, in case you are an Aurifil person. And this is my zigzag stitch, and I just want to make sure that I've got good tension going on. Now the other thing to do when you're stitching out these straight lines is you might want to sit here and figure out, well, how long does it take for me to stitch out this line? Because a lot of times decorative stitches, I'm going to flip over to another one really quickly. A lot of times decorative stitches take an awful lot of time to stitch out. And you kind of are, you know, I'm going to stitch this out right next to it so you can see it. But by doing this, and by taking this time to just stitch this out, you can kind of gauge if you have enough thread, if you have enough patience. That's important. So see, that's a cross stitch one. And that is number 301 on my Bernina. That's just a cross stitch that I'm doing. Now that would be knitted on the edge of an applique, but you have to determine whether or not you have the patience to sit here and do it on the applique shape you're going after to do it. So that's why doing this stitch out is good. And you know, you can like fool around while it's stitching with the stitch width and length. So I can change the way this stitch looks on this test piece of fabric. Let me turn it and I'll show you. So if you can see right here, can you see right there that if I come in a little closer, it's actually gotten a little thinner and a little more close together. So that's why the stitch out is important. And then, you know, I'm going to go over to my favorite, which is 603. Let me get over to the other side. And, you know, doing this test, a lot of people go, oh, I don't need to test. I know my machine. I used it last night. Blah, 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 blah. No, you don't want to take your machine for granted. It changes with humidity. It changes just because it went to sleep. But that is one of my favorites there. So we're going to take all of this out because I think my machine seems to be behaving this morning. You know, I think machines sometimes have ideas of their own. And you can see some of the stitch out there. There's that cross stitch one, and I changed the stitch width and length right here. And then this is number 603 that I like, which I'm going to test today. This one, I do like stitches that tend to go right and then to the center and then over to the left and then back to center. Those are really easy to use and manipulate, especially around circular shapes. So here I've got a mini Splendor kind of test that I do, and I want to show you how to get started on this. So again, with any time I use applique stitching, I'm going to drop my needle down and I'm just rotating the hand wheel one full rotation, and I want to bring that bobbin thread up. Can you see that white thread that just popped up, looped over the blue thread? That is my bobbin thread. I want to bring that up to the top because I don't want any threadness on the bottom. And so I do this even if I'm doing zigzagging, buttonholing, decorative stitches, it doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is now drop my needle down, right down smack into that same hole that the bobbin thread came up. I want to make sure that I hit, because I'm on a computerized machine, I want to make sure that I hit it's a triangle in a circle button on my Bernina that tells the stitch to go back to the beginning of the stitch. Each stitch has its own what do you want to call it, rhythm that it performs and routine and steps. And so sometimes a stitch will go right to center, left to center, right to center, left to center, and that's the conclusion of a full one stitch. So you kind of have to get in tune with what each stitch is doing and what rhythm it's taking. And by hitting a stitch back to the beginning, you're assuring that you're starting at the beginning of that stitch. I'm just holding on to these thread tails now. If you have a secure stitch function, which is usually a knot or something like that, where it knots the stitch before it starts, you want to hit that. If you don't, that's okay too. Just hold on to these thread tails. Mine's going to take 3 stitches in place. Right, there it is. And now it's going to start decorative stitching. And because I know this stitch, this is number 603 again, I know that, see how it's jotting to the right and then the left and then it comes back to center. I know that when I hit center, that's probably a good place to pivot to get around curves here. So as I come and let it do its thing, and again, patience is the name of the game here. You can't push your fabric along, you can't pull it, because you will warp out the stitch. It will not look like the stitch you think it should look like. So you really, it's a light touch, just controlling, very light touch on the fingers. Just control the piece as it comes around. But decorative stitching is far more forgivable, I think, than the zigzag or the buttonhole. Because as I come around this curve here, because it's going to the right and to the left and to the right and the left and hitting center all the time, I really don't have to worry about pivoting and stopping too much. I can just hold it with a light touch and kind of guide it around the curve of the applique piece. And it really is that simple. So it's really more of a matter, and you can see how that's looking, and it's actually, that's why I love that stitch. It just looks great. But it's really more of of getting to know how the machine takes the stitch, and then also just letting the stitch go forth. And I think that's really all it is. I hate to say that it's that simple, but it really is that simple. And I always like to urge everybody to break out their decorative stitches, use their decorative stitches, and create some kind of stitch out like I showed you, because this is very helpful in the sense of just understanding how the stitch takes the stitch. And like I said, every single stitch that's a decorative stitch out there actually has a rhythm to it and a full, what do you want to call it? I lost the word. It's like a routine. It goes to the right, to the center, to the left, to the center, and then it's done. And then it may start over again. So I hope that helps. That's how we do decorative stitching. I want to urge everybody to do decorative stitching on their applique shapes. It really does create texture. It embellishes things. And there's only, a world of possibilities there. You can't make a mistake, I think, with decorative stitching. And of course, thread-wise, another reason the stitch outs are important and testing is important is thread-wise. You can use, there's so many beautiful threads out there. There's polyester threads, there's the variegated polyester, there's the cotton, there's rayon threads, which people use for digitized embroidery. You can use those on the edges of applique. They look wonderful. So anything goes. And of course, thread weight then adds a whole different texture. So with that, if there's any questions, let's see, what did Tina say? So the clear only comes in 60. Yes. It is. It's a very fine thread. I'm not even sure that's a 60 weight. But yes, it only comes in one weight, and you want it to be super fine because a lot of people use the clear monofilament thread to mimic needle turn applique. So if you use a blind hem stitch on the edge of your applique piece and the clear thread, you can and you use a very tiny blind hem stitch, which is a utility stitch. It's not a decorative stitch. You'll find it kind of up near the first 10 stitches on your machine, a blind hem stitch that they use for pants, then you can kind of mimic needle turn applique. So anybody else have any comments or questions about decorative stitching? I think we're okay.
And we'll be streaming okay today.
And yes, it seems like we're streaming okay. So with that, I just want to say, what are we doing now, Carl? I think that's it for today. We're going to be back next month, and hopefully our setup works. We're zooming into Canada the next couple of days to the York Heritage Quilters Guild, where I'm teaching a couple classes. This will be available up on YouTube and the Colourwerx Facebook page to re-look at this broadcast. And we're going to keep you more up to date in all the happenings of the Colourwerx Dezign Haus. So flooring is happening, and hopefully we'll be getting some new throw rugs, which will be really fabulous, and all that stuff. Marion says, I want to learn to applique next. Well, you can do that. Applique. That is super easy. If you check out, by the way, our Colourwerx.com page, there's a little tab that says Pattern Helper Tutorials. And on there, Marion, are some applique stitching helpers to get you started. So Terry says thank you. And Kathy Keevy says thank you. You guys, I want to say thank you to you for tuning in today. Carl and I want to wish you guys, and Julie says, so great to see you again. Good. It's good to see you too, even though I don't see you. I see, like, it's romper room, And so I want to say, have a great weekend. Keep warm out there with the wild weather. Hopefully spring is just around the corner, and we'll be back in March with another fabulous, fun episode of Fab Friday. We really appreciate you guys checking in today. We'll see you in a month, and also we'll just keep posting and give you updates on the Design House. So everybody, thank you so much for checking in. Happy quilting, everybody. Mwah! Have a great weekend.